Hi, good afternoon. My name is Nancy Andrade. I'm the commissioner for the Chicago Commission on Human Relations. And it is my pleasure on behalf of the Chicago Commission on Human Relations to welcome all of you to our ending celebration of Pride Month in Chicago. And we are showcasing this wonderful webinar, which is an educational piece. It's being recorded. Please feel free to access it later. Tell your friends and family about this wonderful program that we're having. And we hope more than anything that it educates people about the wonderful world of being able to love whomever you wish to love, be your true self and love your true self, and have others accept and love your true self. So on that note, I don't want to take more time away from our speakers. I wish to introduce our moderator, Megan Carney. Thank you, Megan, for being with us today. Megan uses the she, her pronouns. She is the artistic director of About Face Theater in Chicago, where her work as a producer, director, and educator advances dialogue about gender and sexuality. Before this role, she served as a director of the Gender and Sexuality Center, one of the centers for cultural understanding and social change at the University of Illinois at Chicago, where she developed and implemented programs and policies to affirm LGBTQIA+ and people to foster inclusion and belonging on campus. She's also collaborated with the LGBT Giving Council of the Chicago Foundation for Women, the Chicago Restroom Access Project of Pride Action Tank, and many theater and humanities organizations dedicated to making positive and social change. So without further ado, I give you Megan Carney.
Thank you, Commissioner. It's great to be here. Welcome, everyone. We're so glad to have this time with you. Here we are on the last day of Pride Month in Chicago, when we're all emerging out of our homes in some different ways. And this is a really important conversation for wrapping up this time of how do we move as allies from sort of reflective curiosity space into action and really transform spaces throughout our city for trans and non-binary people and communities. So honored to be here. Thank you for that. And I want to start off introducing two people who are going to be sort of leading us in this conversation, talk a little bit about how we're going to use our time, and then we'll dive in. So I'm just really thrilled to be joined with Shannon Lynn Parker today. A little bit about Shannon. She is a human rights advocate and public speaker. She currently serves as the Director of Community and Strategic Partnerships at Howard Brown Health. Prior to her role, she was the manager of the Youth Development Program at the Broadway Youth Center. Shannon is the first openly transgender woman to work inside of the Cook County Department of Corrections. And among her many awards and accolades, she is a White House speaker in National HIV/AIDS Strategy and a Chicago Women's March speaker from 2017 and 2018. Welcome, Shannon. So glad to have you here. I also want to introduce Chris Thoren. Chris has worked in storytelling, directing, and community building since 2011. She's currently the marketing and community and relations manager at Treehouse Humane Society and works as an artist with Second Story. She was the general manager of strategy and communications at Chicago Opera Theater and is a graduate of the 2020 Opera America Leadership Intensive. In 2021, Chris began facilitating presentations on trans inclusion in the workplace. She spends her free time cooking with her wife and two pets at their home in Albany Park. Thanks, Chris. Welcome. Glad that you're here.
Me too. Thanks.
So just setting the stage a little bit for today, each person, participating today is bringing their own unique experiences and perspectives to this topic. The topic we were asked to sort of focus our conversation around is care and respect, supporting and affirming Chicago's trans and non-binary communities. So this conversation at its core is about affirming each person's full humanity. And we're starting from a point of believing people and listening to each other as a way of learning together and moving forward from reflection to action. So today, I want to invite you to listen well for a couple of things. I'm going to ask you to listen for moments of action that really make the difference in what people are sharing, and think about what you can do starting today that will increase care and respect for trans and non-binary people in your life and throughout Chicago's communities. What resonates for you? What leaps up as like, that's something I can adapt in my life right away, or something I could turn the volume up in the activities I already have. We're going to be listening to some personal stories. We'll be talking a little bit about current legislation and its impacts, and ultimately naming specific actions that we all want to be mindful of. So without further ado, we'll dive right in. So in some ways, and my background is also in theater, and I use a lot of storytelling, and I do believe strongly in the power of stories and the power of speaking our truth. And in some ways, our stories invite us into that listening space better than anything. So before we get into, statistics or policies, we're going to start in a story space. And we're going to start at the root with a good story from Chris Thoren that was originally developed as part of a Second Story program. And so with that, Chris, I want to turn it over to you.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. I'm just going to hop right in. The first dress that I tried on was well-loved and perfect for summer. It was thin and yellow with warm pinks and earth tones. It had some extra fabric for a chest I didn't have. The straps were thin on my broad shoulders, and it was definitely way too short on me. Liz peeked through her glasses to look at me, grinning. We had met as coworkers in 2014 at one of those jobs that forges indelible bonds of friendship. What started as a straightforward office job turned into the two of us closing a floundering theater company together. Somewhere, digging through costume storage, listing supplies on Craigslist, and hauling boxes around downtown Evanston, a friendship emerged, one based heavily on truth-telling, honesty, and calling each other's bullshit. Well, she asked warmly, how do you feel? First of all, incredibly uncomfortable. Here I was in a dress that didn't really fit, in front of a friend's full-length mirror on a screened-in porch that functioned as a walk-in closet. The mid-June Chicago sun had set on my way over, and the scratch of a record player floated Stevie Nicks through the long apartment as I pulled at the thin straps on my shoulders. Second, though, it sent shivers through me for how free I felt. I breathed out for what felt like the first time in years. My shoulders fell an inch, my jaw relaxed, and my whole body breathed out a sigh of relief I had no idea it was holding in. You know how when you get home and change into comfortable clothes after a long day at work and you feel your whole body relax? It was like that, but deeper. Like there was some invisible tension I was holding onto that I was finally able to let go. My body had spent 26 years tightly wound with a secret it didn't fully understand because I had never bothered to ask it the right questions. I swayed a little bit, watching the fabric dance over my thighs. I felt embarrassed by how much joy I felt, how light I felt. It was objectively not flattering, and even my limited fashion sense could tell I had so much more to learn. Here, Liz said, offering me another one. This one's way more twirly. I grew up loving video games and Legos and Star Wars and dogs. Lion King was my favorite Disney movie. I had a deep crush on Nala. My childhood and history exist to me in colors and shades, broad strokes rather than fine lines. Whenever I talk to out and proud queer people, to other trans and non-binary people, many of them will point to how they knew at an early age. I don't have that. I got what was maybe my first clue, though, in high school. I learned I enjoyed wearing tights through the time-honored high school acting tradition of period Shakespeare. Spoiler warning, in Twelfth Night, The butler Malvolio is tricked into wearing garish yellow cross-gartered stockings, thinking it'll impress his mistress Olivia. I was eager, willing, and happy to pull myself into my costume despite the hot stage lights and the long running time. The women and the rest of the cast laughed at the idea of anyone enjoying hosiery and a doublet for any period of time, but I felt sleek and strong and sexy. With all the benefit of hindsight, I can now add feminine to that list. I never found any joy in dressing up on my own. It wasn't that I disliked my appearance or body, I just never particularly liked any part of it. I took no pride in button-up shirts or ties, and the first time I put product in my hair voluntarily was at the pleading of a headshot photographer, my senior year of college. My family was always the function over form type, and the most fashionable family member I had was my grandmother, who insisted on having her hair done once a week. You know, all that aside, men are never encouraged to experiment with their appearances. They aren't offered the chance to choose pants or a dress, shorts or a skirt, flats or sneakers. Nobody bothers trying to show them skincare or makeup, and at least when I grew up, buzz cuts were the law of the land until we got music videos. You see, men's fashion is additive and restrictive. To get dressier, you add layers or lines, a button down and then a jacket and then a tie and then a vest, always with pants, always with stunningly similar shoes, usually in the same muted color palette. Anyone who has ever worn a full suit to a summer wedding knows that it's a glaring design flaw in men's formal wear, but they do it because that's just what society says to do. Seeing girls in high school shop for dresses and shoes with friends and all the variety they had with their hair and their outfits made me resent male fashion. That changed as I learned suits come in more than one color and texture, and ties are way less necessary than I ever thought they would be, but the fact remains. Women are given so much more flexibility in their wardrobes than men. I was jealous. That jealous feeling settled somewhere squarely in the back left corner closet of my heart. You know the one that touches your stomach, but you don't really have to deal with that often. The door to that closet was closed, and I never had any reason to look inside it, and I didn't. Well, until that summer, just a couple of weeks before twirling around in Liz's closet. My best friend Amy and I were born 2 days apart, and every year we tried to spend the first week of June together to celebrate. Visiting her in Denver, we wandered to the patio of her favorite local Mexican restaurant. It was the kind of early summer day you dream of in the dead of winter. Warm in the sun, cool in the shade, and the perfect time to order drinks in pitcher form and while away the hours. We sat outside and laughed over margaritas and tacos and stumbled into discussing the complex spectrums of gender and sexuality. She talked about the program she was graduating from, how the DSM considered gender dysphoria and homosexuality as diseases as recently as 2012, how her friend was in the process of transitioning, and how much she wished people could feel free to just be themselves. Now, Amy and I met in middle school, which means we've seen each other through every awkward phase of adolescence. She hasn't told me this, but on some level, I think she knew those were words I needed to hear. More than I did, even. We walked back to her house, still deep in gender politics, and I collapsed on our couch as she lamented the boxes society puts men into. Made courageous by friendship and trust and margaritas a mile above sea level, I confess, sometimes I wish I was allowed to be feminine, to wear dresses and tights and flats. I was horrified. I was horrified that I had managed to say that out loud, and the second it left my mouth, I was ashamed. Our culture had taught me that a feminine man is not attractive, and the huge stigmatized burden it carried clung to the air heavily. Amy, to her eternal credit, softly agreed and gave me a significant look. It was the kind of look she gave me when I tried to lie to her or when she needed to say a lot without speaking anything. She tucked her hair behind her ear and asked kindly, "Is that a thing you want?" It was. "Have you tried?" I hadn't. "You should maybe talk to your partner and try on one of hers when you get back. Seriously, the dresses are great, especially in the summer." I deflected and generally agreed before changing the subject, and she let the issue drop without much prodding. I arrived back in Chicago and I couldn't stop thinking about how easy she had made it sound. Have you tried? That simple question kicked off a struggle with gender identity that my subconscious brain had been left alone to deal with my entire life. I was somehow both desperate to talk about it and desperate to forget about it. You're never really eager to have an identity crisis, you know? The first weekend I got back, I was distracting myself with work when a Google Hangout window popped open. A completely innocuous, "How are you?" from Liz sent my brain into a tailspin. I took a deep breath, decided to be brave, and I told her my story about Denver, about this desire I hadn't given voice to before then. "Actually," she typed, the little green dots bouncing, "I'm doing a deep closet purge for feelings reasons. If you wanted to come over and try stuff on, you could. No pressure, but we could put on music and make it fun." I hadn't expected that. Still embarrassed and nervous, I chose bravery and agreed I'd do it. It was just dresses, and I had to try. That night, I sat in Liz's kitchen with a cocktail as she patiently let me talk about everything but my gender identity before seizing on a moment of silence and saying, "You want to try stuff on?" And so I found myself in a dress that didn't really fit in front of a friend's full-length mirror on a screened-in porch that functioned as a walk-in closet. We established 3 ground rules. Rule number 1, no shame or apologizing. Rule number 2, no pressure to try or say anything I wasn't comfortable with. And rule number 3, hugs in abundance and by request. Good rules for life. Now, you know how in every romantic comedy, when the protagonist has a big event to get ready for and someone to impress and desperately needs a makeover because they're too focused in their career to care about how they look, especially because fall is such a busy time for the magazine, and their best friends pull out all the stops in a montage makeover? That's exactly how it was. We treated the whole night like a fashion show, blasting music and going through every dress and skirt in her closet. She'd pull on long forgotten going out outfits while tossing me flowy sundresses. From bridesmaids' gowns that were worn only once to wardrobe staples, she hung outfit after outfit next to her full-length mirror. My embarrassment slowly eroded away, replaced by excitement and eagerness to understand skirt shapes and what sleeves were flattering and where my true waist was. As she helped zip zippers and tie-ties, we talked about her relationship, her family, my relationship, my family. We laughed and we told jokes and hugged and aggressively supported each other. And by the end of the night, I had a pile of old dresses and skirts and was feeling a little less afraid. I wish there was an easy end to this story. I wish that I could say that I put on a dress and I changed my pronouns and I started hormones and now I'm comfortable and brave in my identity and life is generally a fun feminine frolic of acceptance and boldness. Back then though, and even now, putting on a dress or a skirt or a pair of tights means knowing I need to be cautious of bathroom options, knowing I need to have something to look at in line for groceries so I don't notice the stares or the double takes. It means wondering who in the room I'm out to, in what capacity I'm out to them, what strangers I might meet, how they might feel about it. And that's the best case scenario for a trans or non-binary person. For someone less privileged than I am, wearing a dress out in public can be life-threatening. Choosing to express and to own my trans identity is always an active and scary choice to enter the world as a version of myself that's somehow more comfortable, but also more guarded. I choose to do it as often as I can because the world is too loud for me to be quiet, and because representation matters, and because it feels right. I still own a couple of the dresses that Liz let me keep. Now they hang in the closet next to other donations and purchases I've made myself, including the bridesmaid's dress I wore in her wedding. I'm working on styling and accessorizing, on holding my head high, on being visible. I can't wait to find out where the story goes next.
Wow, Chris, thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
That was so beautiful and so beautifully told. Thank you for adapting that for Zoom, Zoom performance. Um, wow, you really took us into a lot of personal moments there, and that's so special and precious. So thank you for that. I mean, that extraordinary breakthrough night of trying dresses on. And also the layers, like what I was hearing was all the layers, like the, you know, the internal journey you and yourself, the social journey with a friend and kind of exploring the rest of the world, the systems in place that inform that sense of bravery and courage and fear and continued vulnerability, and just tapped into a lot of things. So I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I want to give you a chance to catch your breath and bring Shannon into the space. And Shannon, just invite you to share with us a little bit more about your world. I read a little bit about your bio, but would love to hear, you know, what you're doing, like how you would describe like your priorities right now, and you know, and what you're really focused on around this topic, and anything you might want to share to kind of guide us towards like what have you learned about creating affirming environments. And we'll keep weaving in some of those themes from the story as we go. Does that sound like a good? Thank you.
Sure, absolutely. So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for being so generous to give of your probably really busy Wednesdays. Again, I'm Shannon Parker. I use she, her pronouns. Chris, thank you so much for sharing your story. You know, it was really inspiring and moving, and I know that so many folks can relate to that. So my work, my goodness, my work is quite an array. I, at this moment, work in Howard Brown Health on our leadership team, on our executive leadership team to be exact. And my work largely centers supporting our various partners that help to forward the organization's expansion and support of various communities within the LGBTQ community. My work started off primarily supporting trans and non-conforming folks. Now it has taken on a different lens. However, I think that that's really important. Reason being is because I like to consider myself so often as more of a possibility model. I do not believe I in any way, shape, or form am something that, you know, folks should aspire to be, you know, definitely, I mean, it's aspire to be yourself. But the reason why I say possibility model is because so often when we think about trans-identified folks, we often think about a very particular silo or a very particular lens of work that we do, particularly as it relates to community-based organizations. And that is typically around the work of service, right? Servicing direct members of our community through case management, through resource provision, through some type of peer-led action. Whereas with me, I'm on more of the business end of things. And that is so powerful for a lot of trans folks because for the first time they say, wow, so you mean to tell me that there actually is something more that I can do aside from peer-based work? And for individuals out there who are doing peer-based work, that is mighty, lofty, necessary, needed work. But again, I want you to always be expansive in your vision for yourself and how you can contribute to this world. Because the fact is this, we need you in every facet of this work. We need bankers, right? We need Congress people. We need lawmakers. We need DEI folks. We need finance people. We need you. So those are the things that I often say is we need you in every corner of existence that this world has to offer. We need you in the mayor's office, you know, we need you. We need you at Comcast. So again, I say all that to say, I dream of a world that is expansive and as welcoming for trans people as their imaginations and as their hearts see them. You know, that's so important to me. When we talk about DEI work, diversity, equity, and inclusion work, and other things like that within our spaces, the first thing I want to say to people, and it's more of a charge, is you have to first ensure that the spaces you work in have the infrastructure to support this envisioning by building out a solid framework that's going to set the direction and create alignment to generate commitment on a whole. I know I said a lot, and I probably will not be able to repeat that or remember a word I said. However, what I said simply is this: we want DEI to be a living, breathing, active thing. We do not want it to be a catchphrase, right? We do not want to invite people to a table with no intention on them speaking. You know, we don't want to have people come to a table if we're not going to honor their bold, bright, beautiful ideas. You know, we want people to come to those tables to inform us and to move us forward, you know? So that's the first step. We want to make sure that we're creating space in a way that is authentic and not performative. You know, we don't want to check a box. So those are some really important things that I always carry with me when I'm having these conversations, and when I am having conversations around how can we do better? Well, that's how you can do better first, is to make sure that your space is ready for those to come. There are two words that I will kind of leave with before we go into the next question, and that's grace and accountability. There is an ever expanding world that's all around us, right? And we are creating space. And hopefully, as we create that space, we're building safety for individuals who are coming up, who have vast identities and vast expressions and different orientations and ideas and so on and so forth. And the grace part comes in for me is you deserve patience while you are wrapping your minds and readying your hearts and expanding your tongue to say all of the identities and acronyms that are out there. I say accountability because within that grace, you have to have the willingness to be able to say, hey, I'm going to get this right. Because it is not fair for trans people to live in this perpetual space of grace if in fact you have no commitment to getting these things correct. You know, so I want to leave that you all with that. And we'll go on to our next question. Thank you so much, Megan.
Beautiful. Thank you. And you truly did say a lot. And I'm glad that we are recording because that was a very powerful breakdown and invitation. That's what I hear in what you said, an invitation. Get the spaces ready because the potential, the possibility, the vastness is there and waiting to expand and move us forward. And people are ready to advance. So thank you for that. I was really struck. I mean, I just feel like both of you are bringing that the potential and possibilities to do this better into the space today, and I'm really energized by that and appreciating that tone of the vastness of getting to be so full in our lives. And I also think it's helpful to hear setting out the goal like that and inviting people, certainly people in this webinar with us today, but in general, all, you know, the net for each of us who are here, the networks of who we're working with, for us to do our own work about how to get there. Because I think that there isn't a single script, there isn't a single answer, there isn't a single path. We've all got to invest and roll up our sleeves and do the research and figure out from where I'm standing, what can I do? You know, what can I activate from my position? And so I hear that really getting invited in. Chris, I guess I wanted to come back to you and say, wondered about, in your story, you spoke about, breaking through into with courage and moving into a different space. And now I know, you've shared with us that you're doing trainings and you're sort of out front talking with people about inclusion issues. Is there anything that you would like to add to that of what you want people to know about creating affirming spaces?
Yeah, I mean, I think Shannon, I really like what you said about accountability. Yes, I think grace is something that gets forgotten, because I think there's a fear of getting it wrong that sometimes paralyzes people, and folks will end up sort of saying, "Oh, well, we're going to do it wrong, and therefore it's not worth trying." You sort of get paralyzed by you get paralyzed. And the thing that I underline in a space that I like to try to create is a space where if you're showing up to a webinar like this, if you're clicking on it and you're saying, I want to learn more, I want to get better, I am assuming that you are here to learn. And so I try to give as much grace as I humanly can to just asking questions and to start doing the research. Because I think the more that an ally, and even me as a person who I'm continuing to educate myself, the more grace we can give ourselves to just be open to learning, and learning some of these foundational things that I have a lot of empathy for people for whom the concept of using they, them pronouns for someone is totally alien and totally new and goes against what an English teacher told them at a formative age. And I have a lot of empathy for that. Which is why I like to sort of, the grace thing really struck me, about that's how I, as an educator and as a facilitator, can create an inclusive space for anyone who wants to learn. And I hope that is a value that they can take with them as they continue to sort of educate and do their own work.
Great. So jumping on that idea, one of the things we were asked to talk about is pronouns and their importance in the workplace. So let's go there, So if someone showed up thinking like, I want to know more about they, them pronouns, or I want to know more about how to integrate that in the day-to-day, in a professional space, that's a question for both of you. Like, how do you bring people into that world? Like, what do you share with people, and how can they learn more about that? What would you suggest around that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the great things about the time that we're in 2021 is that we have had just about 20 plus years of working and interacting and living with TG&C folks. We know that prior to, we've always seen TG&C folks, right? But we really didn't have the language for their identities, and our identities were largely sensationalized. And now we're seeing us going to a different viewing space, which is really powerful. So in terms of pronoun usage in the workspace and how do we actually get folks on one accord, I think one of the main things is spaces need to be invested in actually hiring external teachers. I say that because, again, the community, the trans and gender nonconforming or non-binary community, let's face it, there are a lot of us who are very generous and who are willing teachers and who are very patient and graceful. But also, too, we have to remember is that we cannot make that a blanketed expectation, because what we do know is that our trans and non-binary colleagues and work family are tired. We navigate our day-to-day lives. We have to fulfill our work expectations. And then to expect us to also be your teachers, that's a lot. That's a lot, right? So having conversations and sourcing external teachers who are experts in doing this work is really important, right? That is really important. Preferably hiring folks from the community who can actually do this level of teaching is also really important too. And when you actually have those individuals come in and do that teaching or do that programming, make sure that you're actually making that an active thing by lining it up with policy, procedures, and things to actually make it stick, right? You know, so again, grace and accountability. Grace is bringing in that expert to teach that subject matter. Accountability is we're going to put this in policy and procedure and in action, and we're going to make it a thing from the top on down.
Yeah, absolutely. Stats for all of that. I think too, something that a colleague once said is assume you already, if you're at an organization and you're wondering how can we be more welcoming to trans and gender nonconforming folks, and you look around at your staff and you don't think anyone is that, just assume we are there. Assume you have a trans person on staff, at least one, and take a look at sort of everything. You can do kind of a survey and sort of see if you're welcoming by just asking yourself that question and assuming you already have that staff member. It's not like a something that is coming down the pike and you might run into something with the Equal Opportunity Employment Commission. No, assume that you have a trans staff member who is feeling excluded by something you are currently doing. And so what can you do as a professional to retain and make that staff member feel more welcome? And there are all these like little tiny ways to do. If you have single stall restrooms that happen to have a gender sign on it, pull it down, easy. If you have, it's now very commonplace and easy to put and encourage pronoun usage in Zoom and in email signatures. Just those little ways, as you are doing the deeper work that Shannon talked about of actually understanding what these things mean and why they're important. There are a bunch of those little gestures that go a really long way towards making someone feel like they can be their full selves, not just with how they're referred to, but also how they dress, who they interact with, what spaces they're invited into. An example I have is that I was at a workplace where we did not have any chance at all during the hiring process to disclose pronoun usage. And I was relatively recently out as a trans woman, and was really excited to sort of celebrate that at work. And because there was no moment where I could say, hey, these are the pronouns I want to use, I was suddenly in a position to have to come out individually to every single coworker in my organization. And I'm like, that's a lot of work. And it also isn't conducive to good work environment. I don't have the time. I have a lot on my plate. I got a big to-do list to go up and say, hey, so I'm going to talk to you about my gender identity. I just want to say, hi, my name is Chris, and these are the pronouns you should use, and let's get to the meeting. And the more that you can sort of streamline that process, I talk to business folks and time-minded folks and money-minded folks. Your productivity is going to go up because you're not needing to rely on your transgender non-conforming employees to do a whole bunch of emotional labor, be really exhausted, and then maybe they're underperforming at a meeting that you expect them to be at their best in doing the job that you hired them for later on that day.
Yeah, Chris, I want to add something. I dream of a day where I do not have to be resilient. I don't want to be resilient. I want to do my job.
I'm done with being brave.
I simply want to be Shannon.
Yeah.
Who comes in and does my work and goes home.
Yep.
And I think that's the thing, right? Is that when we were kids, we saw ourselves as something that was separate from our presentation, identity at birth, so on and so forth. But the things that we desired were still in alignment with our moms, our dads, our neighbors, everybody else. I wanted to get on the train and go to work and sit in an office like my mother and come home and make dinner and go to sleep and do it over again. A lot of us who do this work in the trans community have become rather reluctant activists, I guess you can say.
Yep.
We didn't necessarily want to be activists. It kind of just happened. But really what we're doing is we're shouting and screaming for a world that is terribly mundane.
Yep.
We want to simply be. That's it.
I love that. I talk about that a lot of when I came out. I had a lot of friends ask, oh, does this mean you're going to get involved in X, Y, and Z? And here's this organization. I'm like, y'all, like, I really like my dog. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Never wanted to go into politics. And because I've come out and because I find myself doing this work because I'm passionate about it, because I want to create a better space for people like me and for myself. At the end of the day, yeah, I'm not interested. I'm not a big protest person. They make me really anxious. But there is this sort of expectation that because I'm a member of a marginalized community, and I'm fortunate that this is the only marginalized community I'm a part of, and that is, it's very frustrating. So it's frustrating to have, it's difficult to have a lot of people look and say, what can we do better? And to say, I don't know, just do it. Everything.
Absolutely. Absolutely beautiful. Like, thank you both for just bringing that into the space. And I'm really appreciating people who are warming up the chat for us. And I wanted to invite, continue with comments as you like, but if there are questions popping up or if there are areas that you'd like us to focus in on a little bit more, please put that in the chat. And as we're starting to move into sort of winding down, we want to definitely include, if you came with a specific question, we want to get to your question. So yeah, you both have shared so much about the activism that happens while you're just trying to live your life, and here you are making change and digging in. And it's also just powerful to hear these stories about, like, oh, the space didn't allow me a chance to share my pronouns, so I had to do all this extra effort around that when I was already, interviewing for the job and that sort of thing. So for us as allies for trans and non-binary and gender nonconforming folks, thinking, well, what can we be doing to make sure these things are set up? The table is set for success. The room is ready for people to really thrive and succeed is so important. And there is, we have been at this for a long time, right? Trans, gender nonconforming, non-binary folks have been a part of our cultures and civilizations forever. And our sort of awareness around that in terms of movement work, of course, is always evolving. And we are here in this moment where there is a significant political urgency around us being inclusive and affirming, where we are seeing a sort of, massive movements around anti-trans legislation happening across the country. Thinking about bringing that into our conversation today, I saw this summary that came out just from CNN in April of this year, stating that 33 states have introduced more than 100 bills aimed to curb the rights of transgender people across the country. And many advocacy groups are, considering this a record-breaking year for that kind of legislation. So we don't need to dig into that too much. I mean, the impacts of that are very clear. We don't need to dig into that particularly, but I did want to bring that urgency into the space for people of, this isn't like a back burner topic or need in places where we work, because even if we might be feeling like, I know we can sometimes feel like we are in our bubbles in Chicago, that we know that there's a lot of work that can be done in Chicago to create more affirming spaces, and being part of that national impact that trickles down, and that really is impacting our relationships and our abilities on a lot of levels. So do either of you want to speak to that, how politics do layer into your lives at all? Is that something that you would want to pick up?
I have something on it if Shannon does.
Okay, thanks, Chris.
Cool. Yeah, I think one of the big things that I tell folks is that the politics of it all does it. I am not a 14-year-old trans girl just trying to play soccer in Tennessee. Like, that's not who I am. But I am going to Tennessee for a wedding, and I'm absolutely going to see if they have the big sign that's now legally required in Tennessee to say that if they allow people like me to use a restroom, period. And that takes its own psychological toll, but something that I like to remind people is that this work isn't just for trans and gender nonconforming folks. Pronoun work is for everybody named Dylan or Jordan or Jamie. Respectful naming of people is for any, I am a Chris, never Christopher. The rights of trans youth being able to play sports is also about the privacy of children. It's about access to healthcare. Specifically, I think it has any sort of legislation that passes has really direct effects and impact on access to healthcare, access to women's healthcare, abortion care. It does impact you. It impacts everybody. And as much as it can feel like this sort of fringe thing that's happening, like, oh, that's happening not here in Chicago, it's not happening to me, and it doesn't affect anyone in my life. It does. It has really, it's really easy to draw a direct line from X policy passes or X court decision comes down, and it impacts a decision you have to make later on. It's for any cis woman with short hair and broad shoulders. Like these bills are about policing behavior and policing presentation, which ultimately just reduces rights for everybody, not just someone who identifies as trans or gender nonconforming. That's my pedestal.
And I think that Chris said it all right there. I will simply say, where you put your support matters. This whole conversation has essentially been about decentering yourselves and remembering that there's a world that exists outside of you, and that folks have to navigate this country just like you do. And the safer that we can create, the safer we can make it for other folks, the better we make it for ourselves.
Yeah,
100%.
thank you both. Thank you both. Yeah, it's so essential to move beyond a sense of othering, right? Like, this is other people's problem. This isn't affecting me, because it actually is. That kind of gender policing, the trickle down, the way it limits our imaginations about who we can be. And also because of how interconnected we are. It's so essential to move beyond not my problem. To how do we move forward? How do we move forward together? If someone was listening to this and thinking, okay, I want to read up more, I want to get involved, each of us is working for organizations that directly uplift and work on these issues. Second Story, through storytelling and community building and connections. Howard Brown Health through direct medical service, community building, variety of cultural programs, intergenerational work, About Face Theater through plays and education programs and dialogues and communities. Like, our organizations are good places to start to connect. And how would you build on that list? Like, are there other sources? A friend of mine always says, when people have questions, she's like, Google exists. Like, you could Google anything. Any question that's coming up, Google it. That'll take you on a path, and do a little, editing of what you find there. And you can find good information pretty easily these days. But are there specific directions that you would want to send people in if they're saying, boy, I really want to sink my teeth into a little bit more around this?
I have a favorite.
Let's hear it.
I think it's because I just put a PowerPoint together about this, which is why I'm like, I have this. I'm dropping it into the chat right now. This is transstudent.org, which is a youth-led organization dedicated to transforming the educational environment for trans and gender nonconforming students. So it's led by young folks, folks who are younger than me, who I think are smarter than me about all of this, who are all trans or gender nonconforming, really passionate about that work. There's tons of graphics, there's tons of sort of just info that you can just sink your teeth into. And that to me is a great jumping off point. Say, oh, okay, I've seen that. I want to learn more about that. Here's a link to more resources. And all of a sudden you're in a sort of like vetted professional network of resources. I think it can be sometimes dangerous to send someone to Google with like no direction, because then you end up on the third page and you're on a site that is saying something that's maybe actually harmful, and you go sort of, you like end up in a daze just kind of scrolling. So I really like, I personally really like transstudent.org. I used it in conversations coming out to my extended family. That's my favorite.
So for myself, obviously, I have to say, one of the great things about working at Howard Brown is that we do so much to support trans and non-binary folks through various services that center the needs of TGNC people, whether that is through surgical navigation, whether that is through behavioral health, primary care, hormones, all of those other gender affirming services as well. Also legal supports, right? There is the Transformative Justice Law Project. I probably got that backwards, I'm not sure. They do amazing work with supporting trans folks with name changes, things like that. There's Chicago House Social Service Agency that does the Trans Life Project. They do some amazing work as well. You know, so there are a lot of sources out there that are trusted. That's one of the great things about living in Chicago, is that we are very privileged to have access to a lot of things that folks just downstate don't even have access to.
Yes, and thanks to Google and the internet, people outside of Chicago can find us. And I know we experience that quite a bit at About Face, hearing from people who, you know, will spend a lot of time scouring the website and collecting up what they need. I've got a little bit of construction starting next door. I hope that's not too coming through too strongly. But we're getting some, we've got a comment here from someone in the room. TJLP, Transformative Justice Law Project, helped me with my name change in 2019. So happy to hear the shout out. Yeah, phenomenal organization. I also posted a list of actions that we have named in this conversation that could really move things forward wherever you are. Hire external teachers, hire folks from the community, line it up with policy, procedures, and action. Assume you have a trans person on staff. Single stall bathrooms, get that signage fixed, make that accessible, create and support opportunities to share pronouns. And I guess as we're getting ready to wrap up with just a few minutes, I wonder if I could ask each of you to share either a success story around some work that you're doing, some breakthrough moments, some inspiration that you're carrying with you right now, because the work is hard and the work is ongoing. Can you share with us something that's kind of lifted you up recently?
I would say for myself, I am seeing brilliant, bright, amazing trans people, particularly trans women of color, step into their power, right? Step into professional spaces and offer expertise as a content expert and not simply based on identity. You know, I think that those are some things that have been amazingly success. I mean, those have been some amazing success stories that I have witnessed, you know, personally on a daily basis. I see folks who are doing things they never thought that they would be able to do or given the space to do, you know? So those are my success stories.
I think mine is, I had a good friend, her parents came and visited, and her parents are live in the rural Midwest, very, very friendly folks, but have trouble with some of this stuff. And I learned that not only were they working on it and getting better on using my correct pronouns, but they had begun to educate their parents, who I had never met. I had not met my friend's grandmother, but the sort of ripple effect of having a very, very close friend who is my advocate, who is out there helping me do this education work with folks in her life who maybe I'm not going to interact with that much, who I'm not spending all of my time texting or hanging out with, who aren't often using my pronouns to my face. Knowing that she is sort of on my side, doing that work with her parents, and then her parents are going out and doing that work with folks in their community. It warms my heart to know that there is a world where someone's coworkers in rural Wisconsin is hearing about trans folks for the first time and starting to learn more, and is maybe going to be a little bit more welcoming when their cousin comes out to them. And that's the kind of thing that just lifts me up, and that's why I love doing these, is knowing that any one of the many attendees that are here, or anyone watching this afterwards, will have just a little bit more information, a little bit more curiosity, a little bit more grace, and a little bit more accountability to go out, correct someone, make an effort, do a little bit of education and learning on their own, and make the world just a little bit closer to a very, very mundane one for trans people.
I want that mundane future for you so much. Thank you both for coming into the space and sharing so generously your insights and experiences and wishes for the future. It's been a very powerful, informative time, talking with you. You've shared a lot, and I want to thank you for that. I want to thank everyone who attended today, and for your comments and your questions, and also the attention and respect around the topic is so valuable and important. Please take what you learned today and spread it around. Pass it out into the communities. Let's be generous with this spirit of change. And I did want to mention the Chicago Commission on Human Relations has an annual summit around hate crimes that comes up in October. And so absolutely, if you're interested in the aspects of this related to discrimination, action at a policy level, you want to keep tuned in for that. More information about that coming up in October. So thanks again to the Commissioner for inviting us, for the organizers, the behind the scenes folks who really made this possible. Cheryl, we appreciate the technical support. You all are amazing. It's great to be together and have this time to reflect and plan for change. So thanks, everybody. I hope you have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.